Moses gathered all the congregation of the children of Israel. Shemot, chapter 35, verse 1. The discourse in the Zohar at this point of the Torah story covering the Exodus from Egypt argues the matter of separation rather than the gathering. From the beginning of the Exodus, those who fled Egypt were a multitude of peoples. They went through a series of tests and trials during their travails in the wilderness. They were separated by various requirements, plagues, and wars, until they were the congregation of the children of Israel. The discussion of the serpent, Amalek, Jethro as the Kenite, and some of the emanations and Partsufim terminology all reveal the central point which appears in verse 6. For when there are evil people, the righteous and pious that are among them are punished for their sins. It has not been explained as stated in the discourse, and that is the power concealed openly in the text. Kabbalah is not magic because magic is the concealment of truth with a lie. The rabbis may have already explained or discussed this particular point of wisdom, but it is not evident to the reader who has not covered that information. The power in this passage is the truth of this statement, but it is concealed in the mystery of what it says by its psycholinguistic manipulation. Let's break it down. In a group of people that is a multitude of many backgrounds, there are those among the people in this group who are dissenters, sinners, of the group's norms and values. The multitude that fled Egypt from the wrath of the Pharaoh, who had been plagued by Hashem for not letting Moses and the Hebrews leave, were not all Hebrews, nor would they all become the congregation of the children of Israel by the time they entered the land of Canaan to make it their homeland. Some of them would be from those other nations even into the land of Canaan, but they would become the congregation of the children of Israel. They would be the children of those who fled Egypt to the land promised to Jacob and his descendants. The sinners were the sinners among the multitude that committed the transgressions of the laws of Moses as they travailed in the wilderness. Until they were all removed from the people, the dissenters would cause the others to suffer the punishment of their transgressions. Once the dissenters had all been eliminated by the plagues, wars, and the punishments by both the adjudication of their transgressions and God's own hand upon them, all that remained among those who fled Egypt were the congregation of the children of Israel. Moses had to gather and separate Israel from among them. The lesson of how this can be wrongly understood is in the history of the Jews in the 1940s. The Nazis gathered the Jews and separated them from among the non-Jews. Was Hitler a reincarnation of Moses? Truly, the birth of the nation of Israel was a matter of discriminating against all those who were not from the bloodline of Jacob. Is Judaism equivalent to Nazism? The answer may only be spoken by those who truly know Hashem and the power of truth revealed through Kabbalah. I will tell you the answer. Judaism is not equivalent to Nazism. Those who survived the 40 years in the wilderness are those who kept the commandments, or they were the children who were not punished for the sins of their parents. The congregation of the children of Israel originated from all the different nationalities that lived in Egypt and evolved as the 12 tribes over the 450 years of captivity. They were a multitude of many nationalities from the beginning who held many different beliefs and ideologies. When they arrived in the Promised Land, they were all one nationality with the same beliefs and ideologies. They had become a nation unto themselves as Israel. This podcast instructional series has the purpose of discovering and revealing the secrets of the Torah and Kabbalah. Magic is the concealment of truth with a lie. Mysticism is the revelation of truth by exposing the lies with the truth. The Torah is the eternal truth, and the first lie told about it was that it changed. The Torah is the immutable truth, the eternal truth. It does not change. I would also like to point out the error of this translation as I have in other episodes. The word Elohim is not a permutation of the holy name, and it does not refer to God as a singular entity. This translation of the Zohar into English is an example of magic because it conceals the truth with a lie. In its translation into English, the word Elohim is plural and synonymous with gods, and even angels in some contexts. Hashem, a singular god, is not Elohim. That is the change proposed by heretics who want to claim that God became three persons. God is Elohim, God in the plurality of persons, by this translation, but it is a heresy. God is Eloi, singular. Elohim refers to all others who are not God. The Elohim were gods of the pagans and idolaters. The secret of the Torah scroll is described in the discourse as all the markings for intonation when read in Hebrew, as well as all the specifics of the ceremonious readings of the scrolls. The power of the Torah's truth becomes revealed in solemn treatment and process of reading the scrolls. Thus, there is a brief digression in the use of Kabbalah terminology as the rabbis relate the concepts to the science of Kabbalah and its function in the spiritual dimensions of the lower Sephirot. I have termed the location within the dimension of Malchut, that is the interaction of these Sephirot, as the Metatronic chamber. But this unseen interaction of Sephirot and Malchut is called Zir and Pin in the discourse. Malchut is the physical dimension below the spiritual dimension of Bina. All of the Sephirot within Malchut are the emanations of the spiritual dimension to the physical dimension as emotions and their connective relationships. There are 72 interactions among these 6 Sephirot, which each have 12 dimensional characteristics for each one. 6 times 12 equals 72. The secret of the Torah scroll is how the reading of it, as prescribed, affects the emotions. The feeling of it is described as having the inability to speak and to be in complete awe as the Torah is read in the holy tongue. It is not read twice by 2 people. One reads the holy language and the second translates. The Torah is also read twice on Shabbat. Thus, there are 2 parts of the Torah reading, and this is the sign of the Tetragrammaton by its design. The Tetragrammaton is the holy name in 2 parts, Yud-He and Vav-He. When combined, they form the complete holy name of God. The reading of the Torah in the holy tongue and in a translation is the 2 parts, and reading the Torah twice on Shabbat also represents the 2 parts of the holy name. Reading through the various rules of the Torah reading ceremony that spans verses 226 through 234 in this segment of the Zohar will also cause the reader to have some emotional response, particularly if the described circumstances are a familiar sequence already experienced in the observances of Shabbat and other holidays when the Torah is publicly read aloud. The Torah has a secret power, and it is not magic. The Torah's power comes from the truth that it tells to those who know that it is the eternal truth. The Torah is not a secret because it is not hidden from anyone who wants to read it. I keep a copy of it on my desk, and I read it often. It also helps to have more than one translation to review for parts that seem confusing when the translations do not match up. Most of the discrepancies are simply linguistic expressions of an idea into another language that cannot be completely understood from the original language. The translations are close enough to avoid confusion in most cases. It might not be typical for readers of the Zohar to get to the end of this chapter, but there is a significant example of messianic prophecy in the words of Rashbi. Verses 493 through 496 contain the 2 parts of a prophecy related to the coming of the Messiah. The first part says, when the dead of the world will arise and prepare themselves to go to the Holy Land, troops upon troops shall arise from the land of the Galilee. For there King Messiah is destined to be revealed. The concept of resurrecting the dead is magic, sorcery, and ultimately necromancy. Misinterpretation by heretics will say that this prophecy means the dead bodies will come back to life in a resurrection of the dead flesh. It's not going to happen for two reasons. The first and most obvious is that it is a scientific impossibility for the dead to come back to life from the grave. The second is that Rashbi has already stated that to be resurrected is to be born again, to live again from birth as a babe. It is reincarnation by the principle of rebirth. Resurrection is not the raising of the dead to be whole again and walk the earth the same person as in a life before. Resurrection is the rebirth into a new life, which is to be reincarnated, to live in the flesh again, being returned from the repository of all souls in heaven. The world of God's kingdom is the source of creation, and it is the crown, the spiritual dimension above the physical dimension of Malchut. It is Adam Kadmon, the source of the divine and supernal light emanated from the prism of Atzulit, where this light becomes the three dimensions of the physical reality and the three dimensions of the spiritual reality. The divine light emanates from its source in Adam Kadmon, and it refracts through the prism of Atzulit to become the three worlds that make up the physical dimension of Malchut by refraction. And through the other side of the prism, the divine light becomes the three emanations of the spiritual dimension of Bina. First part of this prophecy is not about the resurrection of the dead at all. It says the dead of the world, which does not literally mean the dead bodies buried in the ground. It is referring to all the people who are dead all over the world to the eternal truth of the Torah. Constantly, the telling of how a lack of observance of the commandments and Shabbat would cause the person who failed in these services of Hashem to be dead in the world. It means they would be outcast from the congregation of the children of Israel. The dead of the world are all of those people who have become outcast from the congregation of the children of Israel. They will arise, prepare themselves to go to the Holy Land. Troops upon troops shall arise upon the land of Galilee. It refers to a return to the Holy Land by an army of the resurrected, those who were born again outside of the Holy Land. It is a prophecy of a new population to come that will amass in Galilee, which is now known as Lebanon. Aside from the Crusades in the 13th century, the mass return of a military force to Lebanon has not yet occurred. As a prophecy, this part of Rashbi's prediction has not been fulfilled. The evidence that the Crusades were not the fulfillment of this prophecy is that there was no King Messiah revealed. There is also no truth to claim that Muhammad was the King Messiah who fulfilled this prophecy, because the second part of the prophecy has also not been fulfilled. While it may be argued that the first half has occurred by correlating specific historical events since 150 circa era and the time of these discourses, it is easy to dispute these claims without the remaining part of the prophecy to validate it. The second part of the prophecy in verses 495. At that time, when all the troops shall rise upon the land of the Galilee, they shall all return, each to his ancestors' inheritance, as it is written, and you shall return every man to his possession. And everybody will recognize each other. The Holy One, blessed be he, will give each and every one embroidered garments, and all will come and praise their master in Jerusalem, where multitude will assemble, and Jerusalem shall extend on all sides, more than it expanded when they assembled, when returned from exile. The troops returning to their homes is a metaphor for peace or victory. The prophecy says that an army will amass in Lebanon, and then peace will ensue as they all come to realize they are brothers, not enemies. They return home peacefully, and the King Messiah becomes revealed in this time of peace. Everyone receives his blessings in the metaphor of embroidered garments, and Jerusalem is restored to beyond its former size and glory. None of that has happened. Troops that have amassed in Lebanon in the past have only served to continue a war with Israel to shrink the size of Jerusalem by demanding that it belongs to Palestine. The prophecy is not fulfilled until the second part of it occurs. Peace in the region and an expansion of Jerusalem to greater than its former glory will occur when the Messiah comes. The passage is messianic prophecy revealed as a secret by the power of mysticism that seeks truth to reveal it. Resurrection is a return as new life being born again. It is not the magical reanimation of dead flesh. Reincarnation is the return of the soul to the earth to be resurrected as new life in the flesh. It is not the return to the earth as the same person, but the reincarnated will remember and regain former knowledge, skills, and characteristics of those from a past time. A belief in the reanimation of dead flesh brought to life from the grave is a heresy and not the truth at all. It is a matter of necromancy to believe in the lie of life returning to dead flesh. We resurrect by being born again as new flesh in a process of recycling, also called reincarnation. The power of Kabbalah revealed. Psalm 29, verse 4 is prophetic. The shattering of the cedars of Lebanon coincides with Rashbi's prophecy of troops upon troops in Galilee. The building of military might in the region is currently occurring, but the outcome is also the prayer of David. While the conflict will spread, as it says in verse 7, it will be catastrophic, as predicted in verse 10, with the allusion to the great flood. What follows is a prayer for healing and strength for Israel. Here is the full breakdown by verse. Verses 1 and 2 are the warnings issued by Israel to Lebanon to submit to their demands on the elimination of Hezbollah. There are two warnings because there have been repetitive attempts to gain the cooperation of the Lebanese government and the security forces to arrest and prosecute Hezbollah activists in their country. Verses 3 and 4 are the references to the bombing of Hezbollah targets. The voice of the Lord is repeated and described as thunder over the mighty waters, power and majesty able to break the cedars of Lebanon. Israel's might in this warfare is the voice of the Lord. The Lebanese will not heed in the warnings from verses 1 and 2. Verses 6 and 7 tell of the Lebanese reaction and actions to be similar to those of the Syrians, who are both wild oxen and skip like a calf. The meaning of this is not completely known today, but the skipping of a calf equated to a wild ox is a metaphorical description of craziness or chaotic behavior. The psalm foretells of Lebanon's chaotic response and loss of control, the same as has occurred in Syria with the exile of its president who fled Syria like a wild ox. The flames of fire is a metaphor for the greater war with Hezbollah, as the Lebanese cedars are unable to stop it. Verses 8 and 9 are the foretelling of the effects and the outcome. The effects of the Israeli assault on Hezbollah in Lebanon will be to convulse the wilderness of Kadesh. This does not literally refer to Kadesh, but it refers to the expansion of the conflict to extend beyond the Lebanese civilization. To convulse the wilderness means to upset its nature. The refugees that flee the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah will be a convulsion in the wilderness. The calving of a hind is the image of a new birth or success juxtaposed with strips for spare. Israel will succeed and Lebanon will fail. The hind is the hart or the deer, and it is symbolic of Israel in the Psalms. A hind that calves is one that gives birth to new life, which represents success. The stripping of a forest is a reference to the cedars of Lebanon, which is a foretelling of the destruction of Hezbollah. The revelation of this is found in the end of verse 9, with Israel celebrating in the temple. Verse 10 is foreboding, and verse 11 is reassuring. The foreboding is in the reference to the catastrophe of the great flood, which is a reference to death and destruction. It also validates how God is king and declares his judgment in this way as king. Thus, verse 11 has the intent to reassure that Israel will be strong and will heal with well-being. There is no doubt that injuries will occur, but David prayed for strength and healing for Israel. They will be victorious, and they will become stronger and healthier than before. As Rashbi predicts, Jerusalem shall extend on all sides, more than it expanded when they assembled when returned from the exile. The renewal of Jerusalem as the property of Israel and its expansion on all sides is in the days when the people returned from Assyria to rebuild the temple that the first time had been long time characteristics of messianic prophecy. The restoration of the kingdom of Israel under a master in Jerusalem and King Messiah, who is destined to be revealed. If Psalm 29 and this passage in the Zohar are predictions of the same thing, then the psalm validates the Zohar as a messianic prophecy. Rashbi finalizes the discourse and its prophetic finality with references to Jeremiah and Isaiah, which are the two prophets of destruction and renewal. They are the messianic prophets who foretold the events of Israel and its future struggles to rebuild after destruction and the coming of a new king, a king of righteousness, who is the Messiah, like King David and Solomon. The stump of Jesse, as it is written in Isaiah chapter 11, verses 1 through 3, does not mean that this Messiah will be an actual blood descendant of Jesse who fathered David. All of what the verse describes are the characteristics of David and Solomon when they were kings of Israel. Being the blood descendant of these two kings is not relevant because it is the character of the king and not his bloodline that becomes the important meaning of the prophecy. It is heretical to think that a bloodline will determine the future of Israel when the future of Israel has always been determined by God's hand and choice. Well, that is all the time we have for this episode of Torah and Kabbalah. Please join me again when I continue to investigate the secrets of the Torah and Kabbalah through the study of the Zohar. I am Michael.